What is going on, Misfits? Good to see you. Welcome back to another edition of Logician Tim Learns with me, your host, Logician Tim. Yes, this is where you get to watch me go from a total gaming newbie to a more informed gaming newbie. How about that? What is up, guys? What's up, Mitchell? Good to see you, my dude. So yeah, we're back. We're looking at some more of this Degenesis RPG, and I got to say, it's pretty incredible. The book is just pretty fantastic. And so I wanted to dive into the combat system a little bit, kind of trying to figure out, what's going on there. How does that work with the D6 dice system? Sometimes I've seen them just be really all narrative based, and I just never got along with that. I like it when they kind of mix in a little bit of hit points in there and kind of damage and healing and all that kind of stuff. Seems like that should be the way RPG is, and they did not let me down. So tonight we're going to be talking about combat in the Degenesis RPG and also the GM guide. So we're going to jump into both of those, and that's going to wrap up this book. And then on Friday, we're going to give it a report card. So I'm looking forward to that. So let's see how it holds up. Let's see. Let me switch real quick over here to the PDF a little bit, and I can flip in my book while I'm doing that. And you guys are checking out that awesome artwork. And we can start kind of flipping through the combat section. Battle is what they call it. So when they start telling us about combat in Degenesis, it starts off pretty basic, just like everything else. It starts off with your initiative rolls, right? So all the players and the NPCs are going to roll for initiative, just like every other game. Now, the highest number of successes, which is a 4, 5, or a 6, plus any triggers. And remember, if you roll a 6, that's considered a trigger. So the highest number of successes plus triggers will go first. The second highest will go next, and so on, right? Nothing new there. The only really couple interesting things, though, about the initiative section in Degenesis, you can spend up to 3 of your ego points, okay, in this section. What's up, Daniel? Good to see you, my dude. DJ, what is up? What is up? Good to see you. Thank you guys for coming. So yeah, remember the ego points are kind of like your mental health. And so when those get all the way to 0, you kind of like start losing your mind a little bit, and you can't go on until you can kind of regain some of those ego points. But here's what's cool about them. You can actually, in the initiative phase, you can spend some of those, up to 3 of your ego points, to add dice to your dice pool. And so this is going to give you, a better chance at getting a higher initiative. And what's cool is it's going to help out your first action during the round. So if you roll any triggers in that in this phase, in your initiative phase, I'll get it out. In your initiative phase, if you roll any triggers, meaning 6s, if you get 2 of them, for every 2 additional triggers you get, you're going to get 1 extra action. So if you roll 2 triggers, you're going to get an extra action on that first round. If you roll 4 triggers, that's going to give you 2 actions. So you can see how that would really make a big impact on your dice and on your encounter if you can start off with an extra attack or 2. That would just be awesome. So yeah, spending those ego points right at the beginning can actually help you kind of get ahead early on into the fight, right? Let's see. And I told you any triggers that you score are going to lead to your additional actions. I told you about that. And so let's talk a little bit about the actions. Here we are. Talk a little bit about the actions. Now, this game has free actions like every other game where you can shout warnings to each other. You can kind of say something really quick. You can, taunt the enemy. You could, drop your weapon or drop your rifle or something like that. Pretty much anything that requires very little or no time, or effort, and is going to be considered a free action. It's just kind of at, kind of GM discretion, but if it makes sense, it's probably going to go for it. So yeah, you have free actions. You can also move a maximum of your body attribute plus your athletics, whatever that is. So if that's, 8, then you can run 8 meters, whatever that is. During your turn, you can run that distance during your turn, and it will not cost you an action, although it does cost you something. So if you move at least 2 meters during your turn, you're going to suffer a -2 to your dice pool. So you're going to automatically remove 2 dice from your dice pool. But because you're moving, you're actually a harder target to hit. I really like this. The enemy has a harder time attacking you, so you're going to get a +1 to your passive defense at the same time. So yeah, you're going to get a -2 dice to your turn, but you're also going to be able to move, making it harder for the enemy to attack you. How cool is that? I really dig it. Really dig it. You're going to get that +1 to your passive defense, and defense is needed. So of course you can use your action to attack too, right? That's what this is all about. And again, the amount of dice that you roll is based on, is determined kind of by the appropriate skill depending on which weapon you're using, right? So your attribute and plus your skill of that weapon. So your body attribute and brawl, maybe if you're just kind of hand to hand like wrestling, or your body attribute and melee if you're using a melee weapon. Agility attribute plus projectile skill would be like a firearm or something like that, maybe a crossbow. And so they just kind of, each one is different, and that's going to tell you how many dice you're going to be able to roll during that attack. And they tell us a little bit about like reloading your weapon. This is usually going to take you one full action round. So let's say you had a rifle that had a magazine, and you emptied that magazine on last round. Well, you actually have to spend an entire round of one action to reload that magazine. So let's see. Yeah, this is that. That's usually the case. Now, if you have something like a muzzle loader, that's going to take a whole lot longer to load. You got to like put the powder down there and like stick the stick down there. All this stuff, right? It takes a lot longer than one round, and that's going to be noted on the weapon table. So it's going to tell you right there how long it takes to reload. So, but it's typically one round or one action. And I say one action instead of one round because, like I said, if you get triggers, then you can, especially in that first round, then for every 2 triggers or 6s that you roll, you can get an additional action. So if you happen to be reloading and you had an extra action, it's only going to take one of your 2 actions. It doesn't take your entire round, right? So, now, dropping your weapon, like I said earlier, does not take an action, but switching weapons does come at a -2 dice penalty. Okay, so you get to remove 2 dice whenever you're switching weapons for that round. So if your weapon is on your belt, though, or in like a holster or kind of like easily accessible, then you won't suffer that 2 dice penalty, that -2D penalty. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're playing to either have your weapons kind of locked and loaded or have them, in a holster or something like that, and make sure that you're ready to go. Now in defense, because it's not just all about good offense, a good defense can also be a good offense, right? So you can forego one action and instead of attacking, prepare for an active defense. Okay. And this is going to allow you to enter the competition, to enter into a competition with the attacker against their roll. Okay, so it's going to be your roll, your defense roll against their attack roll, and this is going to give you a lot better odds to successfully fend them off, right? And what's cool about this is it's also possible for you to counterattack and do damage back to them. I thought this was just kind of cool. It's kind of a long shot because you need to roll at least 3 triggers to do this during your defense. But if you have a really strong defense and if you're rolling 12 dice, then it's not out of the question that you could roll 3 6s, on those 12 dice and be able to damage that attacker back in turn. I think that's just pretty cool. So the way damage is calculated in Degenesis, most weapons have this F number. Okay, F is in Frank, or force actually is what it stands for. Most weapons have this F number that's going to be used to determine damage, and it kind of just tells you on the weapon list. So you have to kind of note that. And it's usually something like F or F divided by 2 or F divided by 3, something like that. Okay, and F stands for your force, and it's your body attribute plus your force skill, right? And that's your F number. And so for an example here, if we had a weapon with that had a 2 plus F2, and what that means is 2 plus your force divided by 2, and your body plus force is 8, All right, so we got to do some old high school math, break out the calculator and the abacus and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's going to be 8 divided by 2 is 4, plus 2 is 6 damage. That's how much damage that weapon is going to do. All right, I hate math. I really do. I hate math. I do. But I figure it's like me, I would be like cheat sheeting this all the way. All right, this weapon is this much. This weapon, I'll do all the math at once and just write down on my sheet and not have to think about it until something changed, because I hate doing math, especially in the middle of a campaign, right? And you're trying to like roll all your dice and the pressure's on you and it's your turn. And I'm like, oh crap, is that 8 divided by 2? Is that 2 plus 8 divided by 2? Like I start freaking out, right? And so yeah, I would have that written down beforehand for sure. Now when it comes to armor, your armor is going to protect you against damage, right? So this is important to know. And armor has what's called an armor rating, and what I used to call armor class. And I think that's what it is in a lot of RPGs and a lot of games. It's called armor class, but they call it armor rating, and that's cool with me. I can get with that. Now the attacker is going to calculate their damage and subtract the armor rating that you have, right? So anything left over from that is going to be applied to the defender's wounds, right? So if they attack and they do 8 damage and my armor is 6, then that's going to do 2 damage to me, right? I can do that math. I'm pretty good at that, right? So that would be 2 damage that's going to be applied to my wounds. And here's kind of how wounds work. This is kind of cool. So the first damage that you're going to take is going to be considered your flesh wounds. And on your character sheet, I wonder if I've got a character sheet on here somewhere. I know I did in that chapter long ago. We can get back to that real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'll find it because I think it's worth looking at it real quick. I think I'll find it, right? Planning on missing it. Yeah, of course I missed it. Of course I missed it. All right, well, I'll find it here in just a second. I want to say it's in the back of the character creation. Do you remember where that thing was? Because I wanted to show you the, of course, like this long, crazy chapter. What's up, Brian? Good to see you, my dude. Yeah, I'll try to find it. Anyways, it's here somewhere. Gosh. Here it is. All right, let me show you. Not that one. This one. All right. So this is what the character sheet looks like. And you can see down here, okay, these 2 boxes. The top box is the flesh wounds, and then the bottom box is your trauma. And so when you're wounded first, you're first going to start boxing out those flesh wounds first, okay? And it's just one flesh wound per point of damage, right? It's easy. You're going to mark them off on your character sheet as it happens. Now, once all of your flesh wounds boxes are marked off, then you're going to start taking trauma damage, and you're going to start suffering penalties too. And so you can see the flesh wound box is a lot larger than the trauma box. And so, yeah, you're going to start suffering some penalties when you take traumas. Now, for every point of trauma that you take, then you're going to suffer a -1 dice to your dice pool, right? And so if just for 1 damage is 1, at 2 damage is 2, at 3 trauma is 3, right? And so it's going to add up, and you're going to get weaker and weaker and be more susceptible to taking more damage, and you're going to die. I mean, you're going to die soon if you don't somehow get out of that situation. So run away, get somebody to block you, something, negotiate something, end the fight, because you're going to die pretty quickly at that point. And so that's kind of how these trauma, the flesh wounds and the trauma points work. Now, ego points are, kind of similar to that. And we talked about that just a minute ago. There's your ego points up there. And these kind of tell you, again, kind of like your mental fortitude, right? And so you're going to use those because you can get mentally attacked. There's like kind of psionic type stuff that can attack you mentally and weaken you and intimidate you and things like that. It'll take your ego points away. And then also you can spend your ego points to be able to move up in the initiative list and gain extra actions and things like that, like we talked about earlier. So yeah, your ego points could get a little bit low and then somebody kind of do a mental attack and then you're in trouble, right? And so your ego attacks are... like I said earlier, once they fall below 0, you're going to kind of mentally break down and you're not going to be able to fight anymore. So your ego points will eventually start to regenerate at the rate of 1 point per day. So that's not much. And they say an extra point can be earned through role-playing your character's concept well. You can gain an additional ego point. But if you're spending 3 in an initiative roll, then and you're only getting a max of 2 back per day, then you kind of have to use them sparingly, right? And if somebody attacks you psionically, then you could be in real trouble. So something to think about, right? Now let's look at healing real quick. Let me move this along. Move my keyboard so to get out of my shot, and now it's like out of everything. Look at this art, you guys. So first, this artwork is just absolutely incredible in this book. So their fight scenes and stuff are just awesome. So you can heal your character, right? So your flesh wounds are going to heal first at the rate of 1 flesh wound per day. And this is like without being treated, right? Just kind of like you chill out, you find a good place to lay back, lick your wounds a little bit. Your flesh wounds are going to heal first at a rate of 1 per day. Now, after all your flesh wounds are healed, then you will start healing your traumas at 1 for every 10 days that pass. Okay, so that's a lot of laying around trying to get those traumas healed up. You know, you can, for 3 points, that's a month just sitting there. Right. So taking damage in here is really tricky, especially if you don't have a healer around. But, you know, you can be healed by other players and NPCs through surgeries. So like after the battle's over, you can go and have a surgery and you can have those traumas kind of looked at and healed once every 4 days. So let's say you got half of it healed in 4 days, then you can get another surgery and take another 4 days and heal the rest of you. So that's kind of cool. You can get heals. You can get your stuff back. It's just going to take you out just, you know, a little bit for a few days, right? And of course, you know, some players are going to be healers as well that can heal on the fly, like those Spitalians and the Nubians, and there's a few other ones that can kind of heal on the fly as well. So hopefully they're going to keep you patched up and not let you get too low on your trauma wounds, especially because, like I said, you're going to start taking those penalties and you're going to sink fast. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the combat section. They did have some stuff about vehicles in combat. Kind of like their speed, accelerating and slowing them down and ramming people. So just know that is in there. They have their own little algorithms that you kind of follow for that, doing different types of maneuvers with them and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, they have things like, you know, fall damage and explosions and drowning and, you know, diseases, all types of stuff. They have those types of rules in here for when they pop up in your game. You can easily look to this section and go, okay, what happens if I'm stuck in this cave without oxygen, right? What happens if, I'm in this spore-infested place and there's no way for me to get rid of these spores? You know, what happens? And it kind of has that all here for you. It's kind of cool. I'll show you a little bit more of this cool art. So yeah, then it kind of goes into the almanac, and I'm not going to go through this section. A lot of it we've kind of gone through. The bazaar is kind of like the equipment guide for the most part. Again, just awesome artwork for the most part. Nothing really that I thought that we should be going through as far as kind of telling you guys on the stream about it. Just a lot of individual items and weapons and all kind of cool stuff. But I want to just kind of flip through here quickly and show you some of the cool artwork and the cool items that are in here. They've really done a good job thinking about all the different types of items. You can see these things are kind of, this is like a gun that a scrapper might have put together, you know, kind of ragtag looking stuff on it. No telling what some of the stuff is. Just looks awesome. So let me see, flip through. Type of goggles, an Uzi with a scope, I guess. Night vision scope with a dagger. Okay. So anyways, awesome stuff, you guys, and plenty of cool items for you guys to check out in here. Some more cool artwork. And then eventually we're going to get to the GM guide. And so let me pull that up for you real quick. That is 315. And I'll jump into the GM guide. And again, the artwork here is just amazing. So, and the GM guide in this game, let me flip through back in my book real quick. The GM guide in Degenesis is a little bit different than the other GM guides I've looked at in other RPGs. Now, what they were really focused on teaching us here is about how to create a good story for your players. Now, a lot of other books that we've looked at kind of talked about how to GM, and in this game, they kind of, it seems like they're assuming you already know how to GM for the most part, right? But they do give you some tips on how to make your stories a little bit better and a little bit stronger. And so I'm going to be going into that here. So they do give a lot of examples for you, while they're explaining all this stuff. But I've refrained kind of from including them because, I just didn't want to spoil anything, because some of them are really, really good. And I could see me or other people, other GMs, using these examples as kind of, little small plot hooks and things like that. And I just don't think it would be cool to spoil them. But just know that they use, several examples in each of these things to kind of kickstart the idea of what they're explaining to you, which is absolutely fabulous for me. I love it when they do that. So they kind of start off, talking to us about an idea, right? And so when you're first starting out, there's usually like an idea or a feeling that inspires you, right? Maybe you recently watched a TV show or a movie that fascinated you, and you're just like, okay, I'd love to try to recreate that in a game somehow. Maybe it was a video game or a book or a comic or something like that that really caught your attention, and you should be using some of these things as inspiration for your adventures in Degenesis. And they really just kind of start off by telling us, take time and jot those things down. Just quick little notes of what that feeling was that you're going to try to portray, or what that setting or theme might be, right? It's kind of anything that comes to mind that you could use in your campaign. And so be sure to include things like, the people, the places, the events, the items, the themes, all these type of things, and getting these little details together are going to really help your story come to life. And they tell us a little bit about this when they start kind of describing the people in the book, in your campaign. So at the center of pretty much every story are the people, right? They are the antagonist and the protagonist. They're the good guys and the bad guys. They're the innocent victims, right? Or the innocent civilians that you're trying to protect or whatever, right? And so then you can also have like extras, right? Extra people that just kind of like the background. And maybe, these people can add danger to the players or help to kind of point them in the right direction or put them on the right path if they start to wander off. But they kind of tell us at this point, don't worry too much about the goals and motivations of the people or what maybe the characters would be willing to do to reach their goals. Just kind of start off small. And they say jot down at least 2 very different characters. Okay. And I think this was cool. Just jot down 2 very different characters. Conflicts, they tell us, often come from an area of social tension between 2 very different characters, right? You kind of see where they're going with this. So this is going to allow you to easily put a plot to the story as kind of your ideas start to flesh out. So just think of these 2 very different and sometimes opposite characters will help you start finding some tension in the story that you're writing. And then secondly, you want to start looking at the locations, right? Players are going to remember the super cool locations that they run into while adventuring. And one of the things that they mentioned here that I thought was cool is they say maybe it's a crumbling bridge being held in place by a psychonaut, like using their psychokinetic forces, right? Well, people are going to remember that just because it's so out of the ordinary and so cool. And locations are a very essential part to any story, and they're going to provide kind of like the visual anchors and the milestones for the characters on the way to their goals, right? Remember that water station that we stopped at? Yeah, it was right over there by that. So you're gonna come up with those type of things as you're telling stories. So the places and sometimes the things that stick out in those places will help remind your players of where certain things are and certain things happen. I think that's awesome. So these places can be explored and offer shelter from danger, or maybe even the elements. They make certain actions possible, and sometimes you can only find water at this one place, or find food at this one place, or sell things, right? And just kind of start thinking like that. And just like with the people, find 2 or more locations that kind of contrast with one another, right? maybe like the rich Neo-Libyans' palace, right? The Neo-Libyans are super rich, and then you compare that to maybe the very slum slave camps that are kind of like right next door, and maybe that'll kind of help spark a story of an uprising that's going to be coming, right? And so you can kind of start fleshing those things out when you think of these two contrasting places as well. And then they kind of move on to items. Now, items such as an ancient artifact or, I don't know, like a special weapon, right? They can be tied to the story as well. And maybe this artifact or weapon was stolen, or maybe somebody's offering it to you as a reward, or, or maybe like the owner has something that they absolutely have to have done. Maybe somebody's attacking his people and they're going to reward you with this ancient artifact or this weapon, right? And you really want it. And so use these items as a creative way to kind of help move the plot forward in your game and help give your players that proverbial carrot, something to do and something to strive for, right? Then they tell us to use cliches and stereotypes in your story. And you remember last week when we were going over the cults and the cultures in Degenesis, they were very, very varied. Very, very varied. Wow, I like that. They were very varied from one another, right? So, and they each had their own specific kind of unique characters about them. And so they kind of tell us in here that cliches are born from experience and kind of help break down like the very complex situations and into these stereotypes, and helps your characters and NPCs kind of understand how they would naturally act, right, when they're around these certain characters. And they're also a very powerful tool for GMs to make this real alien world of Degenesis, more digestible to the players. And so you're going to kind of draw from those stereotypes and cliches that you can dig up when we talked about the cults and the cultures, and kind of help use that in your story. So they kind of talk about like if a scrapper is out there in the wilderness, right, and they're scrapping and digging through stuff and looking through stuff, and all of a sudden here comes this group of apocalyptics. Well, they're going to run as fast as they can, right? They know that they're in mortal danger. They know kind of the history of the apocalyptics and what they've done to other scrappers. They're not sticking around to find out. They're going to hide. They're going to take off running. They're going to make sure to try to avoid that encounter, right? And so they tell us like Neo-Libyans are greedy, right? Scrappers are dirty and corrupt. Spitalians are arrogant assholes. Chroniclers are outcasts and are not compatible with other people for the most part. So use these type of stereotypes in your stories to help kind of shape the actions and reactions of your players and non-player characters, right? And so I thought that was just a cool thing that I wouldn't have thought of before. And they kind of tell us a little bit about using quirks and remarkable features when you're developing your characters as well, your non-player characters. And this is one that I've always enjoyed the idea of. This type of thing really breathes life into the world when, the character's just not like, hey, yeah, go over here and do this, to go over and do that. It just seems like you're just reading to me at that point. Give them some life, give them some flaws, right? Or some quirks. And I like some of these things that they give us here. Give them flamboyant gestures, or maybe they talk too much. They have these really giant hands. I don't know. They close their eyes when other people talk. Maybe they have bad breath, or they have lice. They talk very slowly and softly. Just things like that will really help to bring to life these characters that you're portraying. I think that's awesome. I think it's something that not a lot of people think about, or at least I wouldn't have thought about until we started reading these GM guides, and they tell about these flaws. I like the idea of like stutters, or one of them they said was that maybe they stare at people before making an answer. They stare at you for a long time. Like, dude, it kind of just creeps you out a little bit. But if the GM's kind of doing that when they're answering for that NPC, then that really just helps bring that character to life and make them more memorable. I just love that idea. And they tell us it's also important to note that not all the characters that you're going to run into are human, right? So animals, as well as psychonauts, they are great characters too. And each have their own, logical motives for doing what they do, right? Their own frame of reference, right? So animals are protecting their pack or protecting their young, right? Psychonauts are kind of like their goal is to spread sepsis and the spores around and infect other people, and to protect their spore fields. That's their goal. Their goal, right? That's their job. And so you can kind of easily work these in here and give them, kind of a logical life almost, right? People understand when animals behave a certain way, they're doing it for a reason for the most part. So I just thought that was cool. And then finally, they kind of break down the 3-act story, the classic 3-act story. And I haven't seen an RPG do this before, and so I thought I'd dive into it real shallow here and talk about it a little bit. So Act 1 is the exposition, right? So the characters are kind of being drawn into the adventure. They're exploring their surroundings. It's every RPG starts off at the tavern, it seems, I guess, is the big joke. But they're exploring their surroundings a little bit. They're observing things. They might encounter important characters, but they can't really judge their importance yet. They don't know that that's an important character yet. NPCs don't have any way of knowing which side the characters are on. So the NPCs are kind of filling out the characters too. So that's kind of like your Act 1. So you have a kind of a small Act 1, and then your big section is going to be your Act 2. And they call this the aggravation, okay? So the characters are in the middle of the adventure. This is a large section of your story. They can now kind of judge the fronts, like who's all involved, right? And what's going on. And they can kind of work their way forward. And the scenes are geared towards understanding the conflict and implementing their countermeasures to this conflict and what's all going on, right? So there's some type of speed and excitement and resistance, right? That's going on the way to this kind of climax that's building. And so that's your largest act. And then you go down to Act 3, which is again another smaller act, one of the smallest ones. And this is where they call it the solution. And the characters kind of at this point have everything that they need to vanquish that antagonist, right? Or they're at the end of this long, perilous journey. And now they face the final challenge. And so Act 3 is usually, like I said, very short and condensed and consists of only a few scenes. This is where they're kind of being that final boss, right? Or they're kind of making that final leg of the journey and turning in whatever they were looking for, right? So all that's going to happen in Act 3. And then finally, we're going to start getting into our rewards, right? Because no good deed is left unrewarded. Yeah. So yeah, you're going to have to reward me in the RPG. And they tell us just kind of a good rule of thumb is 1 out of every 4 scenes is to reward the characters and reward them with something worth like 500 CD, which is kind of like their money. Reward them with something like 500 CD or less of an item, either through like maybe they salvaged it or they found it or somebody gave it to them as a reward or something like that. Just do that at 1 out of every 4 scenes, and then every 10 scenes they should get an item worth up to 1,000 CD. And this just kind of keeps the people, your players interested in like, oh crap, that was cool. I got this, and maybe I can sell it or I can do this with it or whatever. So I thought that was kind of cool. Think through that little tidbit in there. And then finally, they kind of talk about your experience, right? So you're going to have to give me some experience points because I've got to level up, guy. I've got to level up. Give me some experience for all the hard work that I've done for you. And so when they talk about experience in here, they have a little bit of a chart here to go through, kind of guidelines for the GM to follow. So they say like if they survived a key scene, then they get +1 EXP. Now, if the scene ended exceptionally well for all characters, then they're all going to get +1 XP. Exceptional performance in the scene as an individual, right? So like he did some awesome dive and catch, or it's some awesome kill, or something like that. Then you're going to get an 1 XP. If you reach the goal of the adventure, then you're going to get 2 XP. And at the end of the campaign, then they tell you to give to multiply the number of adventures times 2 and give them that XP. So if there's 4 of you, then each of you are going to get 8 XP. And I just thought that was cool that they threw that in there so that we have a good guideline on how much experience points we should be giving and to our characters, because again, that's going to level them up And when you level up their attributes and their skills, remember that's going to level up their ranks inside their cults as well. And so that's going to give them some new abilities at times and new gear and weapons just through their cults alone. So I just think that's really cool. And you kind of have to keep all that in check as a GM, kind of depending on what level they are, how fast are they leveling, and those type of things, so that you don't out level your campaign, or you might have to adjust your campaign a little bit, right, as they level up. And so, anyways, that's pretty much for the GM guide. Now they go into a very large, actually it's before this, very large bestiary, and with all types of characters and things, and then they have like a super secret section with all the kind of like key characters that you might run into. And I thought this was really cool, kind of depending on what areas that you might be coming into. So yeah, they kind of have it all arranged out for us. I was in the chapter before this. That's where it is. So yeah, just tons and tons of different characters that you might run into. And the art is just amazing. And different animals. Look at this guy, Spore Beast. I mean, just cool stuff that you can run into. And they give you all the information on it as a GM. You can read this. But this would not be available to the players. You wouldn't want your players kind of knowing all the stuff. You wouldn't want to know all the weaknesses and strengths of everything. So, but yeah, it's giant, and the art is absolutely fantastic. And so it's definitely one that you'll say, hey, this is the guy you're running into, and you just kind of show that to your players, and they go, holy crap. So yeah, cool stuff. And then finally, they have there's the Pharaohmancer. They look crazy. Finally, they have, let me see if I can pull this up here. Yeah, let me pull it up on screen so you can see him. Look how crazy he looks. The Pharaohmancer. Crazy. Then they also have a campaign for us. And I told you, you're going to see some nudity on some of these, kind of light nudity in here in the book. You're just going to see it. It's not everywhere, but it's in here. So just know that. Just cool stuff in here. So they do have a campaign for you as well. They have a sample campaign in the back, and so that you can go through that. You'll have some place to start as a new GM, and I really enjoy it when they do that. And plus, with their GM guide kind of telling us about the stories and the different examples that they give, I think they really do give you enough to start the first campaign that they have, and enough ammunition to feel confident making your own campaign after that. And so I just thought they did a really good job in that. So anyways, that's about it for the Degenesis RPG. And what we're going to do is next time we're going to be talking about, going over the report card. And so this is where I'm going to break down each section from character to mechanics to value, narration, all those type of things, giving it scores for each section, and then finally giving it an overall score with a little bit of commentary to that. And I'll be doing that on Friday. So be sure to tune in on Friday where Degenesis will get its final report card. And then on Sunday, we leave for Gamma. So if you're going to Gamma, be sure to let me know, and I'll try to hook up with you while we're there. So that'd be cool. That's it for me tonight. I appreciate you all tuning in. I hope you all have a fabulous evening, and we will see you all on Friday. Bye.